Hey guys, Lee with LG Speed and Custom here, and in this video we are back on the 32 project. When we left off on the last video, our goal was to try and make this car run and yard drive, be able to drive it in and out of the shop, around the yard a bit. Not roadworthy, but enough that we don't have to push it anymore. We came very close. We got the coolant system done, we got the headers done, we got the fuel lines run, but we're not quite there yet. We still got a couple things to do. I just rummaged through our leftover parts bags and found some of the ignition stuff. We've got the starter solenoid as well as the ignition switch. There was a couple other dash pieces in there. We got the old headlight switch, some random toggle switches, and a horn button. Honk, honk, honk. So we're not going to worry about that stuff yet. I'm not going to wire this car completely yet. Right now we're just going to focus on engine wiring. We got to mount the solenoid. We need to find a home for the ignition switch in the dash somewhere, and then we got to run some wires to there, some battery cables, and cable to the starter, engine ground, stuff like that. That should make the car be able to crank over with power to the coil. We still need to hook up the throttle pedal. I've got an original throttle pedal to go in this, but we need to build linkage to go to this Rochester 2G carburetor that's being adapted to this is a Mercury intake with the 4 bolts instead. So that's what was on the engine when I got it. It worked. We're just gonna run with that for now. Down the road, maybe we'll put a 2-carb intake on it with a couple Strombergs or Hollies, but for now, that works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What else do we need to do? Fluids. I don't know how much oil's in this thing. We're gonna dump the old oil, put fresh oil in. For those that are new, I don't know anything about this engine. This was an old hot rod that was built way before I was born. Speculation suggests sometime in the 60s, but who knows what's happened to it. I mean, that was 50 some years ago, so I don't know the whole story on it, but it's an old hot rod. There was a running and driving car that I bought, but it was built very, very, very crudely, and there's no way I would ever be able to register it and insure it on the roads here in BC where I live. It wouldn't pass inspection. So we blew it right apart and we're rebuilding it. So yeah, where was I going on that? Throttle linkage. We need throttle linkage. We need to top up the engine. We need to wire some stuff. So let's do that. But before we do that, just want to let everybody know, shirts are back in stock on the website. The other day, just got a whole big box of Roadster shirts and the LG logo shirts. Plus, we still have all the other shirt styles that we have. The Comet shirt, the 47 Ford, Brown Sugar, the Thunderbird. So go to lgspeedcustom.com and check it out. And we'll hang out here for a minute while you do that. Okay, and now let's get into it. Let's start building the hot rod. So yes, I realize that this coil and this ignition switch are old and crusty. Did I just call this a coil? This is a solenoid, a starter solenoid. But we're gonna use them anyways. You know why? Because we already have them, so they cost $0. I know they work because I took them off this car and they worked on the car. And the last reason, electronic stuff like this kind of starter solenoids, ignition switches, the modern stuff, like if I was to go to the auto parts store and buy a solenoid right now, because you can still buy this exact same solenoid, the quality on them is such garbage. I've had starter solenoids, like I've had some cars that are 50 years old, still have the original solenoid, works great. I've had brand new starter solenoids, a month, month and a half, 2 months, and they don't work anymore. So when I see old stuff like this that still works, I want to use it because it's way better quality than anything that you could buy today. Also, speaking of old stuff, don't mind this table saw. I watched a video not long ago on how to make a welding fixture table out of an old cast iron table saw. A couple days ago, I got a phone call that one of my friends, the company he's working for, they were cleaning out an estate and there was a bunch of stuff in the garage. So he said, hey, do you want some of this stuff? And this was one of the items in there, along with this cool stool and this guy back here. Check this thing out. This is a homemade hydraulic press. So I'm stoked to grab that as a little bit of a upgrade. The old press is way over there waiting for my friend Brian to come pick it up. He's gonna take that. Anyways, this solenoid, we're gonna mount this somewhere over here on the firewall. I was just looking inside the car and there was 2 holes right here that I welded up. And you know what? I bet you that was those holes right there. I don't want to put it there though because my friend Christian did such a great job pinstriping that. It would suck to put that over top. So I'm thinking we're probably going to mount this solenoid, you know, maybe right here, somewhere where it's still easy to get to, but a little bit, you know, tucked away so it's not right in plain sight. Although I'm not opposed to having stuff in plain sight, it makes it very easy to work on, and I'm definitely a serviceable kind of person when I build cars. When I see, like, right now on like mini trucks and import cars, the big thing is tucking wires where they hide all the wires and stuff. Sure, it looks super clean, but man, what a pain in the ass if you ever got to fix something. So I kind of like to, you know, walk that fine line of making stuff look nice, but still making sure that you can actually work on it and it's functional. So I think I'm gonna mark some holes there, grab a drill some holes, and we'll put this guy in. Our solenoid is all mounted up, so now we can move on to the second part of the ignition system, and that is the key itself. So I've got the original dash. I just took this off the wall. This is just sandblasted right now, and it is in pretty good shape. And we got one hole there. There's a hole here and here on both sides, and a hole here on both sides. I'm not sure if those are stock or not. If anybody watching this video knows, please let me know. I don't think that they are. This hole here I know is definitely not stock. So I've chased all the holes with a tap, a 1/4 inch tap, chased those all out. We are missing one here, and this one has a stud broke in. So to replace that, I'm just going to use a nutsert. For those that don't know what a nutsert is, basically it is a rivet. Let me unthread it here. This is basically like a rivet, except for it's threaded inside. So you use a special nutsert gun that works very similar to a rivet gun. You put it in there like that. And I'm going to need 2 hands for this, so hold on, let me set the camera up. Okay, so we're going to slide it in our hole, and then using 2 hands, because this is thick, you just squeeze it like that. Unthread this guy here, and there we go. Now you can take a bolt and just thread it in. So that's what these are from the factory. These are the same things that we used for our floorboard as well. So this guy here, we got to get that out next, and hopefully if it comes out and we can save this, cool. If not, we'll just put another nutsert in it. So to get this one out, originally I was going to just weld a nut to the broken part that was sticking out, and when you weld a nut on there, what it does is not only does it give you something to put a socket on so that you can thread it out again, but when you weld the nut to it, it makes everything hot and expand. And when it expands, the rust that's holding it, like the seal is broken more or less. And what it does is allows it to thread out really easy most of the time. Sometimes you get a stubborn one and it just breaks again. However, I discovered that this is a brass screw in there. So, I mean, you can't weld to brass. So what I think I'm gonna do instead is, you can see where the factory nutsert is here. I'm just gonna grind that off and then poke it out and put a new nutsert in and be done with it. Beautiful. That was easy. Okay, all our dash screws should work now. All right. I'm just gonna put this together with a couple screws for now, because obviously we got to take it apart and paint it and do all that stuff. Weld up some of these holes. There's a little kerchoink up here I noticed too that's definitely not stock. That looks like something was maybe rubbing. Oh cool, our nutsert's lined up. I kind of took a gamble putting them in without the dash in, because there's a little bit of slop in those holes. So I just kind of centered them as best as I could, and it worked out great. So I was trying to figure out where the ignition switch was in this car when I got it. I mean, the factory one would have been like my Roadster or my 47, which had, you know, the on-off switch on the column. You put the key in and turn it, and then you can turn the switch on and use a push button to start it. But this car doesn't have the original column, and I knew it had the aftermarket ignition. So I went back and looked at the original, or a photo of what it looked like when I bought the car. I shouldn't say original, but, and the ignition switch was crudely mounted right in here with these two screws. Looks terrible. I think we can do better than that. I don't know if I'm gonna use this or not. Haven't decided yet. I don't have gauges for this car yet, so we're gonna ignore this for now. I think I'm gonna put the ignition switch right here, because there's already a hole there. That means we don't have to weld that hole up. And when you sit in the car, like, that's a nice comfy vroom vroom. Yeah, I can start it easy from there using this hole, so let's do that. I think we need to open this up a little bit with a step bit, just to make it a little bit bigger, and it'll work good. I was thinking this hole here at one point, but I mocked the ignition switch up in there, and it's a little bit too big, and if I put a speedometer back in here, they're gonna interfere with each other. And yeah, plus I don't want the keys jingling and dangling right here. Although they're gonna jingle and dangle right here, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We'll just use that hole there. Right there. Yeah. My finger's stuck. Just kidding. This is my step bit. I never knew my real bit. We're gonna use this to open the hole up to this diameter, because this obviously isn't gonna fit. It's close, but not quite. And step bits work great for this. Let's try that size. Oh, one more. One more. It's gonna have to be that size because there's no more sizes. Oh yeah, perfect. Beautiful. All right, where'd the big nut go? Okay, I think our ignition switch is done. So remember when we did the windshield video and I said that I thought I ordered all new hardware and stuff for those? Found it. Got all the windshield stuff here. So we'll do that another day. Well, our solenoid's mounted, our ignition switch is mounted, it's time to start running some wires. Now, wiring really intimidates a lot of people, and it doesn't have to. Wiring is really simple, especially this kind of wiring. These cars are as bare bones basic as you can get, which makes wiring them really easy and really simple. I usually wire cars from scratch. I don't buy kits. I have tons of spools of wire and connectors and stuff. The reason I don't use kits, they're expensive. They're a lot of money for a wiring kit, which is one reason. The other is they're kind of overkill for stuff like this. Most of the hot rod circuits that you buy, they're all like, oh, 12 circuit, 18 circuit, 15 circuit. That's way too many circuits. My Roadster over here has 5 circuits in the whole car. My 47 Ford sitting outside, you know, I wired that car from scratch as well. Both these cars were wired from scratch. And it's fully loaded, that car. It's got a heater, it's got a cigarette lighter, it's got electric wipers, like it's got, you know, every box was checked off on that thing. The only thing that's not wired into that harness is I don't have a radio because I got a flathead. What do I need a radio for? But that car, even with, you know, all the accessories, signal lights, stuff like that, it has 8 circuits in the whole car. So minimal stuff, super simple stuff. So if you guys follow along for the rest of this build, you know, eventually this whole car is going to get wired. So, you know, I'm going to try to explain it to you guys in a nice, simple manner that you can understand. I'm going to grab a notepad and I'll kind of sketch out what we're going to be doing today. Okay, grab a stool, come sit down at the table saw here. We'll sketch this up. All right, today our plan is to make the engine run. We've got our battery. You know what? I'm going to move the camera to the other side so that my hand's not blocking. Okay, that's a little better. We've got our positive side and our negative side. We've got our solenoid over here. It's got one big post coming off it. It's got a second big post coming off of it. And then it's got 2 little posts like that. Up in the dash over here, we've got our ignition switch. Now on the back side, it has 4 posts. 1, 2, 3, and then 1 in the middle. So the one in the middle, this is all labeled on the back of the switch, says start. Then we've got battery, accessory, ignition. We're going to be running, we need to power this somehow. So we're going to run a big heavy battery cable off our battery to one side of the solenoid. All right, so now we've got power going to here. Off of here, this is going to get grounded. So this, on most Ford systems, this stud on the solenoid that's considered your like main power junction. Off of this stud here, so we got power coming to the stud. Off the stud now, we are going to run a smaller wire, probably like a, what do I got here? I think it's 10 gauge wire to our battery post. So what that does is we've got power coming out of the battery to the solenoid, power coming out of off the solenoid. This is essentially the same wire going to our battery. Oh, you know what we forgot? Down here, we've got our starter motor, and it's got a big post on it. As you know, there's a big cable that goes from the other post on your solenoid to your starter. So essentially what the solenoid does is it's like a big switch, and it connects this wire to this wire, which will then make your power go all the way to your starter and makes the starter spin. How this switch activates is there's a big magnet in there, and for that magnet to work, it needs a trigger wire. that's off your start. So when you got power going into your ignition switch, when you turn it to this like crank position, it sends power to here, and that power comes back into there, triggers that, and makes this spin. Cool, right? But how do we get our coil to work? Let's put our coil over here. Coil has a positive side and a negative side. The negative side goes to the distributor. Pretend that's a distributor. When you turn your key to the run position, that puts power to our ignition side. So now we've got power coming out of the battery, going up to the key. The key is turned in the run position, which puts power to the ignition post, and our power goes to the coil. From there, magic happens, it makes the distributor work. That's another topic for another day. So you turn your key to the on position, we've got power to the coil. You turn it one more click to the crank, and it sends power to here, which triggers our solenoid, makes our starter go. The last post on our key here is the accessory one, and that wire will go to your fuse panel. We're not going to worry about that right now because we don't need that to run. So for the next part of this video, we're going to make all these wires happen in the car. Make sense? You guys are still following, right? Great. We're going to start with the big cable from the positive post of the battery to the solenoid. We're going to run it along the frame. I just did a quick measurement, and 54 inches is what we need. We're going to make that out of this. This is some 1 gauge, 1 AWG. Not quite sure what AWG means, but it's gauge, and 1 is the size. 0 is even bigger, 00 is even bigger. This is essentially like welding cable. So this stuff's pretty expensive when you buy it in a roll like this. I bought this there was an RV shop a block over that last summer was going out of business. So they had a big like closing out, buy all our crap sale. And I paid like 80 bucks for this whole roll. It was brand new, and I've just been chipping away at it for years. So we're gonna cut 54 inches of this, and then we're gonna put some of these lugs on the end. These lugs, I buy this, like these little packs off Amazon, and they come with red and black shrink tube. So if you're making a positive cable, you put red on it. If you're making a negative cable, you put black on it. That way it's easy to like not get them mixed up. For the attaching it to the battery, I've got these guys here. The reason I'm using this style, this is like marine style, and the reason I'm using them with these rather than like an actual, like putting an actual battery end on, is I already had these. These were on the car when I drove it home, and they're like brand new, so I'm just gonna reuse them. Easy peasy. Probably gonna cut this with a zip disc. It's really hard to cut through that with like side cutters or stuff, so I'll measure out 54 inches and we'll chop it off, strip the coating back, put one of those guys on. There's our 54-inch cable. One thing I should mention is before I put the ends on here, I filled the inside of that cavity with some dielectric grease. Dielectric grease is great stuff. It keeps moisture from getting in there and ruining your life. I just used a
hammer and a very blunt chisel, and that's how I crimp these. I know they do make a big crimper that goes on there, but I do not have one, so I just use that on this pedestal. This pedestal also came from the same estate, the saw and the press, and I got a bunch of little stuff out of there too. Tons of little boxes like that. That's got all my belt sander belts in it, and a bunch of really old tins of cutting fluid and stuff that, you know, are still usable, and they're in cool old tins. So anyways, that's where this came from. This is just 1-inch solid plate. Crimp them on there. This is good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and install this in the car now. It's gonna run from the battery along the frame rail. When it hits the K-member, it's gonna kick up onto our solenoid. There's the solenoid. Well, there's our main battery power cable is now run to the solenoid. We've got 2 more big cables to make. We need to make one from this side of the solenoid to this post on the starter. We'll probably sneak it underneath here, and hopefully it doesn't get too warm from the header. I don't think it will. And then we're gonna have to do another one from here, a big ground cable. So probably ground that. I don't know if we're gonna ground it to the chassis or the engine block yet. If we ground it to the chassis, we'll have to do another ground from the chassis to the engine block. But if we ground it to the engine block, we'll have to do another ground from the block to the chassis. It's a little bit better to ground it to the block, because when you crank your starter, that's when the most load is on the entire system. So by having it on the block, it's, you know, it ensures the optimum best possibility for a solid ground. So. But sometimes it's just not practical. And if that's the case, then we'll just go to the chassis, and then from the chassis to the block. It all works out in the end. I'm gonna basically do those the exact same. All right, all our cables are done. Are they okay? Do they pass inspection? He doesn't know. He's not certified anyways, so. All right, we've got our big cable coming from the positive side of the battery to the solenoid. Then we've got our starter cable coming off the other side of the solenoid to the starter. We did a big ground off the battery post to the frame rail up here. I utilized the body mount as well, so it kind of works as a body ground as well. And then we've got another cable from the K-member going to the back of the block where the transmission is kicked in. So All our grounds are done. All our heavy cables are done. I also drain the oil out at the same time. So our next step is put oil in, completely unrelated to wiring, but we got to put oil back in. And now we need to run a power wire to the key, and then a wire from the key to the solenoid.
I'm going to put oil in right now. Before I forget, yes, I put the drain plug in. I am using, this is Lucas Hot Rod and Classic 2050. And the reason I use this stuff is it already has the correct zinc amounts in it. As I'm sure most of you know, most engines made after 1985 have roller cams as opposed to flat tappet cams. So oil companies have stopped putting in heavy zinc because cars 1985 was 38 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Basically for the last almost 40 years, cars don't need that much zinc anymore, so they stopped putting it in. But for us Luddites that still use flat tappet cams, you need the zinc, otherwise it'll wipe your cam lobes out instantly. You can buy zinc additive, but I found that it's just easier this way. You don't have to worry about it. It works out to almost the same price. The reason I'm using 2050 is because it's thick, and the thick oil, in my experience, does not leak past the rope seals as easy as like a 5W30. So I like that. I also, it doesn't get, even though I live in Canada, the part of Canada that I live in does not get really cold. We're right by Seattle, so we have almost the same climate as Seattle. So I don't need the super extremely thin oil. Not that 530 is extremely thin, but you know, the thick oil is fine. It also helps because these are, you know, this is an old engine. It's not rebuilt, so, you know, thick oil, it makes the oil pressure gauge look a little bit better. We're all full of oil again. And I didn't put the drain plug in, so it's not on the ground. Back to our wiring. So now we're gonna run a power wire from here through the firewall and put a little grommet in here to the back of our key, and it's gonna go in the battery side. And from there, we're gonna run 2 more wires out of the key, one going to the coil and the other going to this little post on the solenoid. And what that's gonna do is, as you turn the key to crank, it's gonna put power to here, which will activate the little magnet in here and connect here to here. So essentially, what we're doing is just hooking this wire to this wire. We're in gear. Ah! But it moved. Neutral. You hear that? Did you hear that? Exciting. All right, it's after 5 already, and Shannon's come to see why I'm still here and not hanging out with her and Lux and taking Doris to the park. So we'll come back to this tomorrow morning. That's also why I put fresh oil in it now, because I didn't want to crank it over and pump all the old oil into my new oil filter. All right, day 2. We're back at it. So we have on our wiring diagram here, that wire's done. That wire's done. That wire's done. We're gonna run our battery wire to our ignition now. And then from our ignition, we can run our start wire back to the solenoid and our ignition wire to the coil. To run our main battery wire, I've got some 10 gauge, some big heavy stuff. You can never have too many volts going, or amps, or I don't know, whatever they're, amps I guess, yeah. So the heavier wire, the more amps you can run. And because this is essentially going to power up our entire car, we want to run a big one. So I've got this red 10 gauge that I'm going to use. To go from the start position on the key to the solenoid, I've got, this is a 12 gauge? 12 gauge purple wire. The reason I'm using this purple wire when you do get like most wiring harness kits, I install a lot of, for hot rods I make my own kits, but for like wiring, you know, a more common car, like say a 50s or a 60s car, sometimes it makes sense to get the kit. So when you buy those kits, they come with like 20 feet of wire that sometimes you only need to go 6 feet in the car. So I keep all those old wires. And this is one of them. This is the solenoid wire off of a pre-made wiring harness. So it says right on it, ignition switch start, solenoid. So I'm gonna use that one because it's labeled. Also, a lot of the aftermarket kits, there's certain colored wires that do certain things, like red. Red wires usually mean that's like a 12 volt hot wire. It's always got 12 volts to it. Pink usually means 12 volt keyed power. Purple is generally your starter solenoid. So that's the other reason I'm doing that, is just to kind of, you know, keep a little continuity between this and other cars. So let's do this one first. I'm going to, we'll route the wire through the car where we want it, and then when we get it in position, then we'll actually put the ends on it in the car.
If you guys remember a few videos back when we did all the metal work on the firewall here, I kept some of the original holes. I've got grommets in there already, so we can use that for running our wires through. In hindsight, I wish I would have just welded these up, because I don't want wires coming out up here now that it's like together and I can see it. I think I probably would have preferred to weld them all up and then, you know, just run all the wires down through the bottom, like on Aaron's truck here. My Roadster, I did a very similar thing. The harness is all just, you know, there's no wires coming out of the middle of the firewall, so. But it's too late now, so it's painted, it's in. We're just gonna run with it. I think I'm gonna use this one here, and then I can run a wire down maybe along there, or no, I don't think I want to go all the way over there. That's getting weird, especially down here. I think we'll make that our path. We can also branch off from there and go this way, because we got to go to the generator and to our sending units and the coil. We got our big spool on the floor there, and I'm just gonna pass this through with hopefully enough wire to run over to the ignition switch. Inside, we've come through. I've gone up and over top of the dash tunnel. We're gonna take this end here. We'll put a terminal on it, attach it to our ignition switch up there, and then we can route it nice and neat. I wonder, you know, I think I might run the purple wire through now too, and that way I can hook them both up and run them together. I ran our pink wire as well, the one that's gonna go to the coil. So now that all three are in the ignition area, we can put terminals on all of them, hook them all up, and then we'll make this routing all nice and pretty. So I've removed the ignition switch just to make it a little bit easier. And on the back side here, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but each terminal is labeled for what it's for. Like we've got battery, ignition, accessory, and starter. I've got some ring terminals here ready to go. The yellow is for 10 to, I think 14? 10 to 12 gauge wires. So the yellow guy is gonna go on our red wire, because that's a big 12 gauge guy. Blue is 16 to 14 gauge, which is what our solenoid wire is. And then the red terminal is for like 18 to 22 gauge, which is what our ignition wire is. Got those ready to go. If you're gonna do any wiring, get a good pair of crimpers. These are Klein crimpers. They're worth every penny. They're not super expensive. I think these are like 40 or 50 bucks for a set. They're well worth it. Got some strippers. Got some shrink tube. We're gonna cut a couple sections of shrink tube here. Okay, we got our 3 things of shrink tube ready to go. Before we forget, just gonna slide those on right now. Because much like
when you're flaring brake lines, you make the perfect flare and then forget to put your fitting on. The same thing happens with wiring. You make a beautiful crimp and then realize that you forgot to put your shrink tube on. So these little plastic coatings, I don't like them. So I always get rid of them like that and just have the bare terminal like that. Reason being, it's purely an aesthetic thing. I think they look ugly when they're crimped. They get all weird and distorted. So we'll strip that coating off, strip the wire back. We're going to put some dielectric grease on there. Slide our terminal on. Get our crimpers.
Okay, so you've got to put that one in my folder. I've already played Dolly this morning. We're just going to screw up the fillets.
Give that a good crimp. Give it the tug test. Just pull on it a little bit to make sure it is secure. And I forgot my lighter. Now I'll just melt the shrink tube over there. There's one done. We're just going to do that with the rest of them. All three of our ends are done. So look how much, see how clean and tidy that is by getting rid of that big plastic sheathing that's in there. It makes them look nicer. And in my opinion, wiring is like, it's got to be functional, but it's also one of those things like, it's got to look nice too. You got to make it pretty. I spend a lot of time on wiring, and it's one of the, when I'm looking at somebody else's build, it's one of the things I kind of keep my eye out for is wiring, because nice clean wiring, like it's, you know, that's a good way to get respect as a car builder. So we're just going to hook these up as you know, the way they're supposed to on here. Battery going to battery, ignition going to ignition, and then we can put this back in, make our wiring tidy. There's going to be one more wire coming out of here eventually, going to the fuse panel, but we're not getting into that on this video, not today. So we won't put it in any loom or anything yet because we're not quite ready for loom yet. I'll do the entire wiring harness, install it, and then worry about the loom afterwards. All our wires are hooked to the ignition. I test fit the key to make sure when the ignition goes in, it's going to sit, you know, this way. So all our wires are going in the same direction with the idea that they will run over to the cowl and then they can go down the side of the cowl towards the firewall. I'm going to put a couple zip ties on here now. Again, just, you know, taking a couple minutes to make sure that the wires are routed nice and neat. These zip ties, they're just kind of temporary because like I mentioned, we got to put one more wire in still, but we're not ready for it yet. So I'll just put a couple zip ties just to kind of hold it in place. And then when we go back and add that last wire, we can just replace the zip ties. At this point, we can put the ignition switch back and then keep running or zip tying our wires out towards the firewall. Our wiring is all routed. I put a little Adele clamp just on that stud there to hold them. It'll probably have to get upgraded to a bigger one as more wiring happens in here. And we're going out the grommet there. So let's go to the other side and continue on. Out on this side, we've got our spools just laying here all loose. So from here, we're going to run our wires probably over like that. I think we will have to drill a hole probably right there and put a clamp just to hold it there. We'll follow this body line down. The purple solenoid wire and the red battery wire are going to come this way because our red battery wire is going to tie into here. And then our purple wire is going to go here to trigger the solenoid. Our pink wire has to go to the coil. So from here, we'll split them. The two will go this way, and then the pink wire can go this way and run along the top of the intake manifold. There's going to be a couple other wires added to there. We've got to run a wire from our charging system here. This is a a power gen. So they just have one wire. We just need to run one 10 gauge wire from here. We'll follow it along, down, and then it will splice into there. And that'll charge the battery up. We're also going to have to run our temperature wire through there when we get gauges. We're not at that point yet.
Okay, we've got our purple wire going to the start trigger post on the solenoid. We've got our battery wire hooked up to the battery side of the solenoid. I've also run another 10 gauge wire to the back of the power gen, and what that's gonna do is, as this is charging, it will feed into here and go back to the battery. And then we've got our pink wire splits off and goes this way over to the coil. My assistant is in the car and is going to run the key for us while we test all this.
Okay, I got a test light hooked up here, grounded to the engine block, well, the header actually. So we've got power to this side of the solenoid, obviously, because that's where our battery cable runs. Let's go to the coil now. All right, Lux, do you want to turn the key one click to the run position? And we've got power. All right, turn the key one more and see if it cranks over. Do it again. All right, so the two things we've got left now, we still need gasoline, because it's not going to go without gas. And our coil wire is undone. That's not going to help. And we still got to put a throttle pedal in. Just for fun, let's dump a little gas in the carburetor. So I haven't looked at the points or anything in this, so there is a possibility that nothing will happen. Might not have spark, we might have to sand the points. Well, let's try it anyways, why not? Where'd I put the gas? I just grabbed the gas. Okay, Lux, are you ready? Put a little gas in there. All right, see what happens. Oh, wow. Okay. Let's do it one more time. You ready? Okay, now we definitely need gas in the gas tank and a throttle pedal. Were you driving the car? Vroom, 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 vroom.
Damn kid left the key on.
Well, that was exciting. It fired like right up instantly. That was so cool. Gas pedal though, we definitely need a gas pedal. My Roadster, I've talked about the gas pedal on that before and how it was really hokey and never done properly. That's because I got the car to this point and was ready to like go around the block, and I realized I did not even own a gas pedal for it. So I made something up real quick and dirty. It works, but it doesn't work great, but I've never bothered to change it. The gas pedal in this car. This is the gas pedal that was in the car when I bought it and when we drove it home. Functional, works, ugly. Especially because it sat in the car like that. It was at a really weird angle. I don't want to use that. My friend Matt gave me this gas pedal, which I think is from a 34 Ford, which he says is almost the same as a 32 Ford. I don't know, I've never seen them side by side, so I don't know exactly what the difference is, but this was free, which is perfect. I've had it mocked up in there before we painted the firewall, and it does work, so we're gonna put it in. Where it's gonna get weird is this comes this way, because a Ford carburetor, the hookups are on this side. This Rochester 2G carburetor that we have, the hookups are on this side. So I don't know what we're gonna do for throttle linkage yet. We're gonna have to get creative. This one is all in a row, so it worked. It had, that's a U-joint strap. It had a U-joint strap hooked to a rod that just went 90 degrees into the throttle linkage. So step one, we'll put it in, we'll see where we're at, and then get creative from there. There's a little bracket that goes with this that was not painted, so I just painted it. It's sitting over here drying. So I think in the meantime, while it's drying, because I'm super impatient waiting for stuff to dry, let's go to the gas station and get some gas. Shannon and Lux just left. They're going to a dog Halloween show right now. So Doris put her costume on and off they went. They're in the 47, so we've got the Comet here. We'll throw the jerry can in the trunk of the Comet and go hit the gas station.
This might be the easiest gas tank in the world to fill with a jerry can. Too bad jerry cans don't have vents on them anymore. This is gonna take a month. I don't know why I didn't do that years ago. Yeah, so much faster. Okay, we've got our gas pedal bolted in. Let's go see what our linkage looks like. So here's the linkage that used to go to the old throttle pedal. And this end here just hooked into that weird U-joint strap. So I'm wondering if we can't make this just kind of go like a Z shape. I think we should try it and see. We'll set this up so that the pedal is at full throttle. And then we'll set this up at full throttle as well, build our linkage, and then wherever it sits at idle, it sits. And if it's super weird, we can always adjust it, but usually it's not. I threw a couple pieces of tubing on the gas pedal to hold it at full throttle. I found this cut off little ball end in my bucket of random carburetor parts. Took a welding rod. So if that's at full throttle and our pedal's at full throttle, I think that will work. Let's transfer this to we can probably maybe even make this out of this piece and then weld the end to here. Let's try it and see what happens. All right, let's make our chalk mark right there. And then let's bend this 90 degrees. Oh, we went too far. Too much. We can straighten it out though. There we go. All right, let's try this out. So I bent this end, or bent it this direction because this end is threaded so we can fine tune it in and out. And this little nub lines up with that. So if we go in there, we are like a 1/4 inch shy. But that's gonna be fine because right now the pedal is touching the plywood and we're gonna have a little bit of carpet and underlay in there, which is gonna push the pedal up a bit. So I think we should weld this up and try it. We get to use our new table saw fixture table too. Should we clean it up and paint it and put it on, or should we put it on and try it first? Let's clean it up, or put it on and try it first. Okay, let's take our blocks off. See what happens. Is it working? I can't tell. It is, but it's weird. There's another spot down there. I think we need to do some refinement. Okay, we're working properly now. The issue was there's this spring down here that's supposed to go up here, and it pushes the pedal forward, kind of like a return spring, and it was pushing this too far forward. So I just unhooked it, and it's laying to the side there because, like I said, I don't think I want to keep this carburetor. I want to go to something a little more traditional. So I just hooked up a return spring here instead, and it's working properly now. I'm not super stoked on it. I might redo it later. I thought of this after I painted it and cleaned it all up, but if I had, instead of going 90 and 90, if I came back to here and then did like a 45 across, I think would look nicer. And it would also stop, it's a little bit like, it does that a bit, which doesn't affect anything, but I think if it had a 45 and a 45, it wouldn't do that as bad. So, all right, I think we got gas in the tank. Our throttle works. Let's dump a little gas down the carburetor. We'll crank it over and see if the fuel pump will pick up some fuel.
Give it a squirt of fuel. Make sure Lux didn't accidentally put it in gear. Nope. A little more. The cool thing with this clear fuel line is you can see what's going on. Yeah, we got fuel coming in. A little more. It's up to the sediment bowl now, but it hasn't gone into the carburetor yet. This ought to do it. Oh, it's going in. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick little walk around and check for leaks. A little bit on the carburetor there, but I don't know, that might have been, I might have spilt a little bit when I was squirting it in, so it's not getting any worse. Let's try our throttle pedal. Should we see if it moves? Oh yeah. Let's move the Roadster and go for a drive.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Isn't it great? These guys don't seem to be leaking. That didn't fix itself, did it? No. That wouldn't work. That's not gonna work. That's definitely gonna explode in my face at the worst possible time. Out in the middle of nowhere. No carburetor leak. That must have spilt. It was wet right in here. So I must have spilt some when I was priming it.
Well, I am like just so stoked right now that I don't even know what to talk about. It drives. Just drove it. Last time I drove this car was August of 2022. It is now October 2023, so just over a year. A year and what, 2 months? August, September, October. Yeah, a year and say 2.5 months or so since the last time this car drove. That's a pretty good turnaround, I think. So obviously it's not done. It is so far from done. We've got no lights, we've got no side glass, we've got no top. Still don't have, well, we got front fenders, we just got to put them on. I've been holding off putting the front fenders on because to work on it, you can just, you know, walk up and work on it. You don't have to lean over fender. Leaning over fenders kind of sucks. It's not fun. Tuning, I don't know. I mean, it ran. It seemed all right. It drove okay. I think the front left wheel, when you step on the brakes, it doesn't want to release right away. So I might have to pull that hub off. And I don't know, maybe I forgot to put the spring back on or something ridiculous like that. Stranger things have happened. But yeah, it seems to drive okay. It's a little rough, but that also could be because it's like, it's just an empty shell right now. So every little bump, it just like magnifies it that much more. It's incredible how much sound deadening having a full interior does for like just making it more comfortable to drive. It's not like having your head in a tin can. So yeah, I don't know what to do next on this. We should probably figure some gauges out because I have no idea what the temperature was doing. I have no idea what the oil pressure was doing. Not that I'm concerned about the oil pressure because there's nothing I can do about it anyways. It either has oil pressure or it doesn't. Having a gauge hooked up to it to tell me if it has oil pressure or not isn't going to change the oil pressure situation. So, but we'll still put gauges on it just because, I mean, it is a good thing to know if you do have oil pressure and then all of a sudden you don't have oil pressure, you can be like, whoa, we got a problem. We got to pull over. Same with temperature. When I drove this back from, I picked this car up at Make It Custom at Carl Fisher's place. He didn't build it. He was literally just like a dropping point for the delivery truck. But yeah, we drove it back from his place. It was like a 4-hour drive and no gauges at all. So I have no idea what it was doing temperature wise. I mean, coolant never blew out in my face. There was at one point earlier when we first moved it out, I shut it off and I burped it a little bit. There was a little bubble came out. Oh yeah, we got a little bit of heat in it. Not much. But yeah, my overflow is full and we burped it a little bit, so, but that's kind of normal, so. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. Thanks so much for watching, if you guys are still watching. Especially those that have been watching this series since the beginning. That's so awesome. I love your dedication. Anyways, make sure to check out the website, lgspeedcustom.com. Get yourself some LG Speed and Custom merch. I think this car is almost getting to the point where I should, I don't know, maybe look into making a t-shirt design on it? I don't know. That's a process. Usually from like the idea of let's make a t-shirt to actually having an actual t-shirt, You know, sometimes takes 6-7 months to get going, so. But maybe now's a good time to start, don't you think? I'm hungry. I'm gonna go get some food. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.